Thank you very much for having this opportunity to share information with you and to present our European experiences. And now first I have to share the screen. And I would like to check if my screen is visible for you. Okay, thank you very much. Well, today I was asked to give a presentation about a framework of the implementation of a PTI-PN test procedure. And well, PTI stands for periodic technical inspection and PN for particle number. Well, first I would like to introduce myself. Hola, gente querida. These words I've studied in detail, but unfortunately not more for today. I'm living in the Netherlands and I work since 1988 at TNO. TNO is an independent research organization, and I work as a researcher consultant. And since 2012, we have started this project in the Netherlands for checking diesel particulate filters in the PTI. And well, I worked for approximately 7-8 years on this project, and now more or less it is closed. And in the meantime, I started a new project with gasoline vehicles with focus on NOx emissions of these vehicles with high mileages. But for today, we have this presentation. I would like to give an introduction and the goal of your working group in South America. And then I would like to give two partial presentations about implementation of this test procedure in your national regulation. That's a governmental issue. And the second part is a more technical part of this subject. Okay, then first we start, I think it's mainly meant for policymakers. What do you have to do as a policymaker to implement this new PTI-PN test procedure in your national regulation? Well, first, your common goal, the goal of Chile, Mexico, Colombia, and Peru, is to implement a new test procedure for vehicles who are equipped with a particulate filter. It can be trucks or non-road mobile machinery. And with this, with this technology, diesel particulate filters, it's an extreme powerful technology to improve air quality because PM emissions can decrease 95 to 99%. But particulate filters have not a guaranteed long-term performance. It's not obvious that they stay in good health. So the quality of diesel particulate filters must be monitored. And one of the pillars of a long-term durability of diesel particulate filters is that vehicles or machinery is well maintained. Another issue is that in the field, also in Europe, we see that in time when vehicles are getting old, there might happen some technical problems with these particulate filters, and a certain percentage of the fleet runs without a diesel particulate filter. And in that case, well, the particle emission can increase 100 to 1,000 times. So this must be avoided. So removal of diesel particulate filters is a point of attention. And as a government, as a national government in South America, you need a tool for periodic technical inspections or roadside inspections to check the presence of diesel particulate filters and the filtration performance. I would like to have a short check. Is the connection well at this moment? So maybe somebody can give some sign, because I hear nothing and I see nothing. Is the connection right?
Maffer, ¿me escuchas? Yo sí te escucho.
Everything is fine, Gerrit. We can hear you perfectly.
Thank you.
María Fe?
Thank you very much. Then I will continue.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, in the Netherlands, we started this program in 2012 because the Dutch ministry requested TNO, how can we check diesel particulate filters in the periodic technical inspection? And in this project, it took 7 years. In the end, it was December 2019, the new test procedure was published in our National Gazette. So it was announced as a new test procedure with a low idle speed test. The specification of the particle counter was explained in the publication, and also particulate number limit values. So from the legal side, in 2019, it was announced as a potential test procedure. But particulate counters are not yet available. So in 2020, our Dutch Meteorological Institute has started certification of this specific particle counters for the PTI. And it is expected that at the end of this year, a few special particle counters for the PTI will be offered to the market. And as soon as sufficient testers are available and there is competition on the market, our ministry will announce that this new test procedure will be introduced in our national PTI. And then it is expected that end of 2021, all diesel vehicles with a diesel particulate filter must be tested in the PTI. So we are more or less at the end of the implementation of this new test procedure in the Netherlands. But going back to your goal, you need in the 4 countries, Chile, Mexico, Colombia, and Peru, also a new particulate number test procedure for periodic technical inspections and roadside inspections. And you want to define this test procedure, and you want to implement this test procedure. It contains 3 main elements, because you need to specify an emission test. In the Netherlands, it is a low idle speed test. you need to specify a particular number counter and calibration procedure. This is public information in the Netherlands. I understood you already have this information, and it is translated into Spanish. It is available for South America. And of course, you need, as a legislator, to specify particulate number limit values. These are the three main elements. So, as a policymaker, you have kind of a step approach. There are certain elements which you need for your new PTI PN test procedure. And first, you need to define the three elements: an emission test, a PN limit value, and the PN tester and calibration procedures. All Dutch documents, Dutch is are the documents from my country, from the Netherlands, are available for you. They are public, and so you can use them to define your own documents. Well, in 2020, the final PTI PN test procedure will be published in the Netherlands, and the specification of the PN tester was published by our Meteorological Institute. So currently in the world, there is at this moment one specification of a low-cost PN tester. There is also a Swiss specification, but this tester is more expensive. So this low-cost PN tester is only specified in the Netherlands, and this there are different other initiatives in Europe. Also, Germany is working on this topic, and they it is expected that Germany in 2023 will publish their new test procedure. So they are a few years behind. And at this moment, new discussions are started on two levels. On UNECE level in Geneva, they are considering implementation of this PTI PN test procedure, and also the European Commission in Brussels started to investigate this new test procedure. So a lot of parties in Europe, Belgium, Germany, European Commission, UNECE in Geneva, they all are considering implementation of this new test procedure. They have the same process as you have. Well, for policymakers, what is a PN emission test in a nutshell? With a particulate counter, we measure the particle concentration, which means particles per cubic centimeter. And in ambient air in the Netherlands, the concentration is approximately 5,000 or 7,000 particles per cubic centimeter. That is the left part of this graph. See ambient air. At the right side, the sample probe is put into an exhaust of a vehicle with 100,000 kilometers and a diesel particulate filter. And then you see the particle concentration is going to near 0 particles per cubic centimeter. So this picture shows that a diesel particulate filter is extremely effective, and we see 70% of the vehicles in the Netherlands have this behavior. So another fact of this test is in principle, it takes 30 seconds to check a diesel particulate filter. So it is very short, simple, robust, relatively cheap, and easy to perform. As soon as you have a test procedure, you also need to define the limit values. So which vehicle will pass, which vehicle will fail. And we did a lot of study what must be a limit value, and the limit value of a PTI test is less stringent than the PN limit value in a chassis dynamometer test in the type approval. And also, older vehicles are only checked in the type approval for particulate matter and not for particulate number. So this limit value is less stringent than the more modern vehicles, Euro 5B, Euro 6, light and heavy duty. So we have two limit values in the Netherlands, 1 million for the older vehicles with diesel particulate filter, and the more modern vehicles, 250,000. In 2017, we started a group which we called NPTI, New Periodic Technical Inspection, TNO and VERT in Switzerland. Dr. Meyer, we decided to start a group to define a new test procedure based on particulate number. And in these years, all equipment manufacturers wanted to join this group. And in this group, researchers, metrological institutes, policy officers, we defined, our main task was to define new, cheap particle counters for the periodic technical inspection. And in 2 years, we managed to specify this and to, to have common sense. And in the end, the Dutch government, the Dutch ministry, ordered the Meteorological Institute in the Netherlands to specify this, to make documents. And last year, they were published by our Meteorological Institute. So this is a first result of this group, is the Dutch national specification of the particle counter. The expected price of the particle counter is 4,500 euro to 8,500. And the end of this year, we expect that these testers are available on the market. There's another initiative on the harmonization of this new particle counter. In Paris, OEML, it's a worldwide organization who defines a lot of standards, and OEML decided to start a new project, especially for particle number counters to measure particle concentration in exhaust gas. So Germany and Netherlands are leaders of this group, and it is expected that in a few years there is not only a national specification but also a worldwide specification of this tester. And for standardization, I think this is a very good initiative. So as a legislator, if you want to make a roadmap for implementation of the PTI PN test procedure, you have to describe the test procedure, the limit values, particle number counter or particle number tester, and you need to make new national legislation, PTI legislation. And I think this differs from country to country, but in the Netherlands, all the documents are public and published. They are available. These documents, you can use them to implement in your national PTI legislation. So if I may recommend a step approach, I would recommend these steps. First, define your emission test. Secondly, you have to define your PN limit values per emission class. You have to specify your particulate number tester. And step number 4, the calibration procedures. Very important is step number 5, because these new particulate number counters must be checked from time to time and calibrated. So you need a structure for calibration for these new PN testers. And number 6 is specifically, you need to register in your national database if vehicles are equipped with DPF or not, because in the field, people have to know if they have to check a diesel particulate filter or not. So, because not all vehicles are equipped with the DPF, especially in the first years. So I can imagine that you continue testing vehicles without DPF with smoke emissions. That's the case in the Netherlands. Vehicles without diesel particulate filter still must fulfill the smoke emission test, and vehicles with the diesel particulate filter have to fulfill the new particulate number test. Once you have this partition, you need to register for operators if vehicles are equipped with a diesel particulate filter. And finally, step number 7 is you need to define a pathway for implementation of this particulate number test procedure. And it first starts with an announcement in your National Gazette, where you announce the new PTI test procedure. I can imagine you start with the pilot phase in a certain region or a certain city. And finally, you have the final implementation for your whole country. Well, this is the end of the first presentation. And I think on the agenda, there is scheduled a break. So for this moment, I'll give the floor back to the moderator.
Muchas gracias, Gerrit, por la primera parte de tu presentación. Efectivamente, acá hemos planteado un pequeño descanso. Estamos un poquito demorados con el tiempo. Tenemos las 10:43 en la hora de Lima. Hemos propuesto 10 minutos. Yo les invitaría a que lo hagamos solamente de 5 minutos para tomar un poquito de aire, de refresco, y en 5 minutos volveríamos con la segunda parte de la presentación de Gerrit. Entonces, yo los invito, son las 10:43, a las 10:48 a volver, por favor, para poder continuar con la presentación de Gerrit. Muchas gracias. Para los que se mantienen en línea, hemos ido recabando las preguntas hasta el momento que han hecho a Gerrit. Podrían usar también estos minutos para poder formular sus preguntas a través de con la traducción. Sería el momento también que podamos ayudarles a solucionar algún inconveniente que tengan. Perfecto, muchas gracias por la predisposición de volver también a los 5 minutos para tener más tiempo para la discusión. Gerrit, can you hear us?
Yes, very well.
You can continue, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
In this second part, it's especially meant for people who are technically raised, and I hope this will, I can serve you with this information. The contents of this part is, first, we talk about type approval and in-service conformity requirements. We will talk about diesel particulate filters and filtration behavior, about details of the PTI PN test procedure, and the calibration of the particulate counter. Well, for a PTI emission test, the requirements were quite strict because otherwise stakeholders will not accept a new test procedure. And one of the most important ones is the test procedure must be fast and easy. In this case, it takes approximately 30 to 60 seconds. And also, it is a very simple test. It must be cheap, so we need a low-cost emission tester with an easy calibration. We also need test results which are repeatable and reproducible, because when there is a lot of doubt about the quality, we only have discussions. And consequently, we don't want to have too much false positive test results, so that vehicles will pass the PTI for no good reasons, only less than 3%, but we don't accept false negative results because vehicle owners will go to court, and that's not well what we want. So no false negative test results. And another important issue is that a test in the periodic technical inspection must be less stringent than in-service conformity or type approval tests. So once diesel particulate filters were implemented, the particulate emission of these vehicles reduced 95 to 99%. So diesel particulate filters are extremely effective, and this very good technology needs some care to maintain them and to keep them in good condition. And once we implement a diesel particulate filter, we do not just anymore the quality of the combustion of an engine, but we judge the filtration efficiency of a filter. And this is an advantage because a filter is far more easy to check than an engine. So due to the very low particulate levels of vehicles with diesel particulate filter, we need another measurement, another principle to measure emissions, very low emissions after a diesel particulate filter. This is an example of two groups of vehicles. At the left figure, you see particulate number emissions of 13 vehicles without diesel particulate filter. At low idle speed, the emission is between 1 and nearly 12 million particles per cubic centimeter. 1 to 12 million. At the right side, we tested 23 vehicles with diesel particulate filters. These were very old vehicles at the end of their lifetime. And from these 23 vehicles, which mostly of them have a very low particulate number concentration, but 3 vehicles had a defective diesel particulate filter, and their emissions are around 4 to 5 million particles per cubic centimeter. So the difference between an engine emission and a post-DPF emission, which is very big. So on average, we reduce the particulate emission from 5 million to 500 particles per cubic centimeter. In the type approval tests for vehicles and engines, also particulate mass and particulate number measurements are prescribed. So these are measured and there are limit values. For vehicles, for particulate mass, approximately 5 milligram per kilometers, and particulate number 6 to the power 11 particles per kilometer. These are limit values for type approval or in-service conformity. These are very strict limit values, and in the PTI, we need less stringent limit values. In order to avoid false negative and false positive results. So when you look to this graph, we only want to have in-service conformity pass and PTI pass, or a PTI fail with an in-service conformity fail. We don't want an in-service conformity pass and a PTI fail, because this would mean that the in-service conformity test is less stringent than the PTI test. So pass-fail criteria of a PTI test must be related to the pass-fail criteria of an in-service conformity or type approval test, but less. And once I explained the limit values in the former presentation, they are 250,000 and 1 million. And with these values, you never will pass an in-service conformity test. This is the relationship of particulate number emissions at low idle speed and particulate number emissions in a chassis dyno test. Fortunately, there is a very good relationship. So as soon as we know a particulate number concentration at low idle speed, we can estimate, based on this graph, the particulate number emission in an NADC emission test. And then it is possible to create limit values in the PTI which are less stringent, but they still relate to the chassis dyno test. For PTI, you need to specify the particulate number tester. In the working group NPTI, we spoke in 8 meetings during 2 years. What do we have to define for such a tester? And on the basis of the European legislation for type approval and also other legislation, we specified the particulate number counter for the PTI. So similar to the type approval, we measure only solid particles. So the volatile particles will be removed in the tester. The tester is characterized with particles of 23, 50, and 80 nanometer. And this means these are the most representative particles in diesel and gasoline engines. And the measuring range of the tester is 5,000 to 5 million particles per cubic centimeter. In part 1 of the documents, the complete tester is specified, and also the tests which must be passed in the type approval are specified. This is a metrological document. And in part 2 of the documents, the calibration procedures for the initial calibration, the subsequent calibration. This is performed for every new PN tester performed by the manufacturer. And also the in-field calibration is specified, because once a tester is at an operator, it's very important to calibrate it yearly, and in these documents, the complete procedure is described. They are published, and you see at the bottom of this sheet the link. There you can download part 1 and 2. And if you have specific questions, you can contact Mr. Kok, Paul Kok from NMI. If you cannot find him, please contact me. These are details of the counting efficiencies and particle sizes of the new PN tester. We started to study regulation 83 from UNECE, and in this regulation, only 2 particle sizes are specified at 23 and 41 nanometers. They specify counting efficiencies and also an accuracy of plus or minus 10%. Some years later, for on-road testing, PEMS equipment was specified also by the European Commission. This PN counter from the PEMS equipment is specified with 6 particle sizes, 23, 30, 50, 70, and 100 and 200 nanometers. Counting efficiencies are specified, and also at the right side, an accuracy plus or minus 10%. For the national Dutch particle counter for PTI, we specified particle sizes in line with the European particle counters, but allowed a less accurate instrument, because this was very important to have a low cost instrument. Well, once you measure an engine with or without diesel particulate filter, what can you expect? This is a Ford Fiesta Euro 6B diesel engine. And in this graph, the particulate number concentration before the diesel particulate filter, so pre-DPF, is measured, and post-DPF is measured. So pre-DPF, without, we measure 4 to 15 million particles per cubic centimeter. And due to the minor leakage of this diesel particulate filter, we measured post-DPF in the tailpipe 250,000 to 6 million. So when it is fully warmed up, 250,000. So this vehicle was a borderliner. 250,000 is around the limit value. We experienced that even vehicles less than 1 year old sometimes have a defective diesel particulate filter. So it's very surprising that some vehicles, relatively new, already have a failure. This is an example of a similar measurement with a Euro 6 truck, a Volvo. It has around 50,000 kilometers, so it's quite new. And we measured particle number concentration, the blue and the red lines, pre and post diesel particulate filter at the same time. The green line is engine speed. So we first started with ambient air, and around 500 seconds, low idle speed measurement was started. And before this particular filter, we measured 5 to 8 million particles per cubic centimeter. And after the diesel particulate filter, less than 100 particles per cubic centimeter, which is less than ambient air concentration. So this shows the high conversion rate of a diesel particulate filter, high filtration efficiency. Once we measure a fleet, so in the Netherlands we measured approximately 220 light-duty vehicles. And in order to get an impression, what can you expect with higher numbers? And well, 76% of the vehicles have a PN emission below ambient air concentration. So these vehicles will immediately pass in 30 seconds. 24% of these vehicles have an elevated emission, up to 250,000. And 10% of these vehicles had an PN emission of 250,000, and we think they have a serious problem with their diesel particulate filter. But this gives an impression of a fleet, and in my last report of 2020, which was published in January, there is a summary of investigations of fleets in Europe. So what we see is that in general, 8 to 20% is a failure in the published studies. This is the European situation, but we also know that it is very hard to get a right impression of failure rate in a country. You need a massive amount of statistical data to have the right view on this situation. This is an example of 5 different trucks, similar to the former truck measurement. From these 5 Euro 6 trucks with diesel particulate filter, they all emit at low idle speed less than ambient air concentration. So this shows that diesel particulate filters have very low emissions, and a limit value of 250,000 is very easy to pass. So in the end, we also have to recognize that there are engine conditions. And based on these conditions, the particulate number emission of the engine may vary from 1 to 15 million particles per cubic centimeter. For most diesel particulate filter, it's not important to consider the engine conditions, because the filtration efficiency is that high that they always pass the limit values. But for the borderliners, it is important to precondition the engine in the right way. And this is the condition with the lowest particulate number emission of the engines. And these conditions are a warm engine at low idle speed with a closed EGR valve. And then if you measure 30 seconds, 15 seconds stabilization and 50 seconds for measuring and averaging, you have a very defined particulate number test. In the Netherlands, we expect that only 5 to 10% of the vehicles must be brought into this condition. The other can be tested in 30 seconds. So this is an overview of the particulate number emission at the different conditions of an engine, because an engine can have high, medium, or no EGR. An engine can be cold and warm. And at the right bottom side, you see there is the lowest particulate number emission. So this is the reference condition for a particulate number test, as you need this, only as you need this. And we experience that nearly all well-functioning engines have this emission under these conditions. And engines are more or less comparable. In the end, we defined our Dutch test procedure in steps, and in this flow chart, the total procedure is described. It's relatively simple and easy because you can offer the vehicle in any condition, and if it fails, you can recondition the vehicle. Say, you can warm up the engine and close the EGR valve and offer the vehicle again. And within 30 seconds, you know if it is a pass or a fail. The calibration of the PN tester is an important pillar. And the first verification, the initial verification, is done at the type approval. So the manufacturer has to prove that the PN tester performs according to the specification. Then the type approval documents are ready and launched, and the manufacturer is allowed to sell these testers on the market. Every particle counter needs to be verified in a subsequent verification. So all the sold particle counters must be checked in subsequent verifications by the manufacturer. And as soon as the particle counters are working in the field, they need to be verified yearly by a calibration service. And we expect that all these calibrations can be done at site. So the particle counter can stay in the service shop or in the PTI station, and you don't need to miss the tester for weeks. You can read these verifications also in the NMI documents. This is an example of a calibration test setup. It is based on international standards of ISO 27891. In 2017, there was an international regulation published for calibration of particle counters. Please read the documents and you recognize that the calibration procedures are very well defined. Thank you very much for this opportunity to give this presentation, and I am fully ready to answer your questions.